Greg Berzinsky for Beardbrand Alliance. You're a young guy and you just cannot wait to have a beard. Sometimes it doesn't come exactly when you want it. Let's take a look at some guys ages 17 to 21 to see what you might expect to see on a young man's face, noting that these aren't necessarily the final beards that they'll have as an adult. Stay tuned. I want to show you some guys who are fairly young, who are just growing their first beards for the first time. How do you compare to these guys? They say, hey, you don't compare yourself to other guys. But in reality, I think we do compare ourselves. Let's see if your 17-year-old beard stacks up to these. Let's see if your 21-year-old beard stacks up to these also. We have Mav Attack here, and we can see that there is some definitely shadowing on his face. He definitely has a beard. And yes, he grows a good beard at the age of 17. Is this the average that you might expect to see? I don't think it is. This guy possesses more on his face than most guys do at this age. You can actually see that his mustache is not the strong suit of his beard. He definitely has very strong neck beard with hair down to here. And I suspect that when this guy is in his mid-20s or 30s, he will have one of those show beards that we often so envy on this channel. But this can be a typical 17-year-old beard. Let's take a look at another. Here we have a 20-year-old guy, and you can actually see in his before picture that he is indeed already bearded. He actually reported that he likes growing his beard and has grown his beard to this. You can see he is well covered at the age of 20, and he actually likes having a beard for the reason that I suspect that a lot of guys like having a beard is so they can look older. This guy says that most people think he's about 26 years old, and sure enough, he does look a little older than the age of 20. Is this average? I don't know. Let's take a look at some of the other guys that we have in our sample. Joe here, he is from New York, and he is 21 years old. And you can see that he has some shadowing on his face and definitely some chin hair. When he grows his hair in, he has coverage, which I think would be considered the average amount of coverage that a guy would have on his face at about the age of 20. Very full in certain areas, coming up a little less full in other areas. Characteristically below the tails of the mustache, in this area generally on the face, a lot of guys have a little less hair, and that may remain until you are an adult. I suspect that at the age of 20, with this much coverage, that he will continue to grow a beard and get a bigger beard as he gets a little older. Is this the average 20-year-old beard? I actually think this probably is about what you could expect to see on the average 21-year-old's face. Next up, we have a 19-year-old named Rishabh. He is from India, and he is growing his beard for about 5 months. You can actually see that he has some coverage on his face. Once again, pretty characteristic with some areas that aren't 100%. No one's young beard comes in with even coverage. I would say 95% of all guys' beards when they are early, in their late teens and very early in their 20s, have strong areas on their beard that come in sooner before the others. You may be much like that. A lot of guys report having a stronger mustache first, and a lot of others have strong sideburns. You can actually see that when he lets his beard grow in, he has a fairly substantial beard. This is 5 months of growth. So he has a fair amount of hair, but this is not the amount of hair that a 30-year-old person might grow when they let their beard grow for 5 months. Like at my age, when I let my beard grow for 5 months, you get this amount of hair, and typically that ½ inch per month. And so when you're younger, the hair growth rate can often be slower. And that's like watching paint dry sometimes and watching the grass grow. It can just come in slower and not as even as it will potentially when you are in your mid-20s or later. But this is pretty good beard for this young age. Another young guy here from India at the age of 19 years old. You can actually see a 5 o'clock shadow on his face, on the mustache, and as well as on the quite defined dimpled chin. And what does he look like when he actually lets that grow in? You can see that he has grown a Van Dyke, the mustache with a little bit of an anchor and some of the chin hair there is a typical Van Dyke shape. And that's what you can do also. When your young beard is coming in, As I said before, some of those areas are going to be stronger than others. And in this case, mustache being strong, chin being strong, so why not wear a partial beard? You do not necessarily have to wear the full beard, especially if you don't have it. So it's great that you have options at an early age, and that a lot of the facial patterns that you can have on your face can lend themselves fairly well to partial beard patterns. Here's a guy at the top end of the spectrum in terms of the age. He has turned 22 years old. You can see his smooth baby face here, and there's not much an indication of how much hair he has. But when he lets it grow in, you can see that he has a full beard. So you can see by the age of 22, you might be blessed with a full beard. This would not be typical of a guy, say, at 16 or 17 years old. So you could be that guy. You could be a guy that would get a fair amount of hair at an early age. This beard may continue to mature and get even fuller. You can actually see that he has a fair amount of hair on his cheeks that he chooses to shave. And so my suspicion is by the time that he is in his mid-20s or later, he may be rocking a pretty massive beard, or at least have the potential to do so. We have Shuri here, who is 21 years old, and you can see that he has some sparseness on his cheeks, fair amount of mustache and chin growth, and when he lets his beard come in, you can see that it starts to cover in. Passage of time in this photographs, I'm not quite sure, but you can see that if you let your hair grow a little bit, you may get the coverage that you need. Is this his adult beard? I think that at 21, he may yet have some years in him to develop that mature adult beard that may come in his mid-20s or later. But I think this is pretty typical of a guy who is 21 years old. Up next is Khalif, who is 18 years old. Wow, 18 years old, and you can see that he has some hair on his lower cheek, his lower chin, and on his cheeks. And when he lets this come in at the 18 years old, bam, has a full beard, has a huge mustache, and has hair up to there. So is this typical of what you can expect at the age of 18? I'm going to say no. But this is a guy who is also particularly hairy. You can see by the type of eyebrows he has. Some guys, when puberty hits hard, and you can actually develop a fair amount of hair. We have an 18-year-old from Jordan named Khalid, and you can see that he is fairly smooth here, and in letting his beard grow, he has a fair amount of hair. So once again, we're seeing a variety in the types of hair placement that we have on guys' face, from fairly average, which I would consider average, to fairly hairy and showing up with a lot of beard on their face at an early age, especially on a guy here who is only 18 years old. There is a fair amount of hair. So what will you get? What will show up on your face? I think one of the biggest factors, there are actually two factors. One of them is just plain old genetics. Are you a hairy person? Do you come from a hairy line of guys? Does your father, uncles, grandparents have a lot of hair on your face? That's also related to ethnicity. Some cultures have more hair potentially on their face, Mediterranean men. A lot of Asian men have less hair on their faces. So that's one thing to keep in mind, your actual genetic makeup. Another factor on having a beard early is when you go through puberty. Guys typically who go through puberty later at the age of 16 or 17 are not going to have a lot of hair on their face. It takes probably on average about 5 years from the time you start puberty until you get a significant amount of body hair as well as facial hair. So what about your beard? What about your facial hair at a young age? And even the guys who are watching this who are a little older, were you an early bloomer? Did you have a significant amount of hair on your face at the age of 18? Or did you have to wait, like in my case, until you were way past 18, pushing 40 or 50 years old before your facial hair actually came in? Comment below, we'd love to hear about it. Until we meet again.
Speaking of fragrances.
What about it?
Speaking of fragrances. I haven't gotten to smell it myself, but just from the people I do know have had a chance, they said it's their favorite so far.
Dude, it's great. It's great. That was the one that I was like, dude, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay.
They nailed it. So
I can't wait to try it out, man.